I always feel like I look like a cop wearing these ones, don't I? Dude, I'm the patch cop right now, and I'm about to tell you the patch winners and losers here for the most recent patch, the Freezing Rush 2. Boy, I couldn't get through that one. Freezing Rush. Hello, everybody. Jake, your resident content cop here. Yeehaw! As I'm going to break down the Pokemon who won and lost in our recent patch. And there's been some pretty interesting changes. I think this patch and the Freezing Rush Part 1, like overall, this has actually been a lot of buffs and nerfs kind of equally considered as they went. I think it's kind of cool that they broke it up over two patches where if it was just one big one, we'd have to wait a while for things like Ceruledge and Armarouge to be nerfed. In general, I wish the patches were just a little bigger overall, but I do like the cadence at which the patches are coming and sort of their thought process behind it. I also love getting to see exactly what the devs are saying about a patch. Like, for instance, I just wanted to pull up Zacian right here because I thought it was pretty interesting. A lot of people were saying Zacian didn't have a high pick rate, which is true, even though it was really dominant. And I love their reasoning. In high rank matches, which they're basically talking about competitive, like high rank competitive play, Sacred Sword has significantly increased Zacian's win rate. Consequently, its overall effectiveness has been reduced. I really like that we're kind of hearing what's going on. We also have one from Mewtwo-Y, which we'll talk about here in a sec. Mewtwo-Y had low win rate and pick rates since the nerf in July. Basic attack speed was increased, blah, blah, blah. They talk about what they did. But I like that we're not only getting a, like, kind of part one of a patch, and then part two where they're tweaking things, right? I like that we have this cadence of patch, and I also like that we have a lot of information as to why they are doing what they're doing. I still don't know what they were doing with Dragapult. I truly don't. I understand it was a pub stomper, but I don't get it. That's like last patch, right? But let's get into it. The winners and losers. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the patch in general right now, because I do think if we have a month where we have patches like this, like every month we have like a Freezing Rush Part 1, then they like go, okay, this was a little too much, and then we have Freezing Rush Part 2. I think that's really solid. And in general, as a community, I think we are absolutely winning with a patch schedule like this. Multiple patches a month that are addressing things for like various reasons, I think is very solid. All right, on to the list. Let's start with a big patch winner that I always expected would make its way onto a buff list. I was just hoping it was going to take a little while longer, and that is Glaceon. Look, Glaceon is a problem because Glaceon is so simple to use. Its moves are ridiculous, and they have to find a sweet spot between it doing not enough damage and too much damage for the fact that it really requires nothing to get this Pokemon online doing that kind of damage. Once it hits level 6, it has a sure hit move that follows you across the map that just needs you to be within its area of influence for a second. Anyway, it wasn't winning enough because it was slightly undertuned damage-wise, even though I think that was exactly where it needed to be. Now Glaceon has received not only damage buffs, but also some survivability buffs, along with a few other attackers, which we'll get to here. Glaceon is a definite winner here. I think anytime you are buffing a move that requires this little thought, you are in a bit of trouble. But here we are. Let's talk about a patch loser, and we mentioned it just a minute ago. That is Zacian. Zacian did lose because of how good Sacred Sword is, and they've actually taken multiple elements of it back. I still think Zacian is going to be an amazing pick, especially at a high skill level, but I understand the change. I think it was very, very fair. In fact, I want to move on to my next loser, and that is a loser in general. All-rounders. All-rounders are kind of being toned back across the board here. We've seen multiple patches in a row where all-rounders are getting pruned because they are all considerably overpowered, and that is true. Gyarados, Ceruledge, Blaziken, Zacian, like all of these Pokemon, like Urshifu, like Zard, the list goes on and on. These things are crazy overpowered. They are dominating the game. So I understand why all of the all-rounders are taking hits lately. So in general, all-rounders taking big L's in the past few patches. Let's talk about a weird middle ground one. Now, this is definitely a slight win for this Pokemon, but this is my category, and that's Blissey. There's no question that Blissey kind of could have deserved these buffs to Helping Hand and Safeguard. The only reason these nerfs took place in the first place is because it was being paired with a completely broken Mewtwo Y, will get to you, from, days gone by. That was the reason that Safeguard Helping Hand needed a nerf. It wasn't because Safeguard Helping Hand was too good. It was because there was a Pokemon in the game that took too much advantage over this ridiculous combination. Now, Blissey has been buffed. And Mewtwo Y. Why don't we talk about it? Big time winner, Mewtwo Y. Huge wins for this Pokemon. This Pokemon was not as bad as people thought it was. It just wasn't as brain dead as it used to be. I like that the buffs they gave it are sort of a half step. Like, it's not like they brought back Mewtwo Y by any means, but there is no question in my mind that Mewtwo Y did not need these buffs. It's just that it wasn't as simple as it was back when you could just hold the A button and win games. I never want to go back there. I like that we're kind of in this middle ground a little bit, but Mewtwo Y getting buffs for like 5 parts of its kit is pretty amazing. It's a big win for Mewtwo Y. I want to talk about another couple quick winners here, a couple of attackers, and it looks like attackers in general are kind of creeping up. The way all-rounders lost, attackers are winning here. So we talked about Glaceon. Espeon, Psyshock buffs are crazy, crazy good. I don't know if Future Sight's going to become meta. It's fun, but I still think Psybeam is overwhelmingly, most of the time. So if you hit Future Sight, and you get a KO, there's definite potential there. If you do not get a KO with Future Sight, Psybeam is just so incredibly good. Like, a Psyshock into a Psybeam hitting multiple enemies is devastating. And now that Psyshock does even more damage, it makes it more potent in lane early, plus you gave it some survivability. Espeon is a sneaky, massive winner this patch. Like, almost my winner of the patch, I would say. And while we're on the attackers, again, Gardevoir, big time winner. Gardevoir, I think, was in a weird middle ground where it was very, very good, but the reasons they gave it buffs made sense. It's not very mobile. It can get punished pretty hard. However, it does a good amount of damage. Let's lean into the ranged and crazy damage version of it and give it a little more survivability when someone is jumping in trying to stop it. I love this change for Guard. A nice winner in this patch. We talked a little bit about a former EX Pokemon being a loser, and there are a couple more here. So where Mewtwo Y won, Miraidon unfortunately lost, but it was pretty fair for Miraidon. Miraidon was still overpowered, and it hadn't received the full set of nerfs that all of the other EX Pokemon got before the EX tag was removed. Another Pokemon who is also a loser here, another EX, is Ho-Oh. This one feels not as bad to me. However, I think Fire Spin might have been nerfed enough. We're going to have to see. I still think it'll be very good, but I think Fire Spin might have been nerfed enough to where this is a sizable nerf for it. The Unite move, you're still going to have your Unite up for Ray. You just have to be a little more careful of when you're going to use it. But I still think the Unite move portion of it will be fine. I think it's Fire Spin that really took a hit here. And then finally, a former EX and all-rounder, somehow Mewtwo X received a nerf. Now, if you said they buffed Mewtwo X along with Mewtwo Y, I'd kind of go, yeah, okay, but they nerfed the damage reduction effect on Psystrike for Mewtwo X. I get it. But in a world where Y got buffed, X didn't, it's just an odd one. So a weird loser in this patch. Take that, you weird loser. Here's an all-rounder that somehow won, Azumarill. Azumarill is interesting because I think it's needed some late game scaling buffs for a while, and they've given it a little bit of that. Its Unite move now gives you a bigger shield, which is essentially like mid to late game. You have better defenses, which is essentially late game. And then you also have a cooldown on Whirlpool. I actually think Whirlpool has been sneaky good for a while here. It's just Azumarill does have that little in the final moments of a fight where you would rather be a lot of other all-rounders. Now I think Azumarill's in a much better spot. Nice little buff. Does it make it meta? I doubt it, but where other all-rounders are losing, Azumarill is somehow picking up W's out here. Here's a big winner, Greedent. Multiple buffs for Greedent. Unite move cooldown, Bullet Seed, Covet, Belch. They recognize that Greedent is a monster, and they want to let this monster just do what it does. They're not changing the nature of what Greedent is, but one of the really nice buffs to this kit is the slow on Belch. The slow on Belch is now massive. That actually changes things in a big way, where you're more disruptive as a tank using Covet Belch. So Covet has this knock-up effect to it. It also gives you hindrance resistance, so you can kind of mess with many enemies at once, while at the same time, you get a huge slow on Belch plus increased damage. Across the board, great Greedent buffs, and we saw some Greedent buffs a little while back too to the Bullet Seed line. So over the course of this year, they've actually tuned up Greedent quite a bit. I think it's way more formidable now. Here's another for me, and that's Pikachu. No question, getting nerfs is you're losing the patch a little, right? But I don't think Pikachu was hit that hard, and I think one nerf that makes total sense is to its Unite move. Its Unite move now hitting multiple targets every single strike rather than just that first one is huge, and I do think a small damage reduction there makes total sense. Also, I mean, you could do something to Volt Tackle, but instead they decided to take a little bit of the damage away from Thunder and Electro Ball. I think there are a few different ways you could have messed with Pika, but they are clearly leaning into its role as support attacker and kind of like peeling back some of the damage it had. Honestly, very fair, and I don't think it's a huge loser for it. We're coming to the end of our list here, so I want to go over a few winners and losers and then into our big winner and our big loser of the patch. So a couple winners for me. Let's take a look. Yes, Blaziken. Blaziken did receive nerfs a little while back, but at the same time, I don't think they were that huge, and I actually think people are sleeping on Blaziken. It's still crazy good. The nerfs were not massive to this thing, and with all other all-rounders essentially taking big hits, Blaziken is looking better and better and better. And then, of course, a massive winner, I think everyone knows it, Darkrai. Darkrai released kind of mid, but one of its movesets was terrible. Darkrai released mid with one moveset being terrible, and then they buffed it to S tier. And I think they could have given a reasonable nerf. Like, we went all the way up to S. I think they could like scale it back a little bit, maybe like remove 10% of its damage, increase a cooldown on a move, something like that. Like, let's do it a little here. But I also recognize they're in this weird position where they release it, its win rate is abysmal, no one can do well with it. It's their new Pokemon. Of course, they want people to be playing well and excited about it. They want people to invest not only time in the game, but money into a new Pokemon that is coming out. And no one would want to if the thing is awful. Then they buff it through the ceiling. And I think this was an opportunity where they could have fixed it a little bit. I'm also not super surprised given it's their brand new release. You often don't see them tone it back unless it's like that time where they kind of way overbuffed Metagross, where every match it was doing like 150,000 damage. Darkrai is clearly overpowered, and it probably should have received even like a small shave off the top, like just a little trim nerf, and it didn't receive that. So a huge winner for Darkrai. A few losers for me are, of course, Phalanx. Phalanx has needed buffs for a while here. I'm not saying it's god-awful, but man, this thing has fallen off the face of the earth and become one of the lowest picked Pokemon in the game since its nerfs. It absolutely needs some buffs, even if they're small, just to get people back to playing one of the coolest Pokemon releases that they have ever made. And then two more losers here before we get to the overall loser of the patch. I think Goodra, now that all the defenders are sort of getting some love here, except for ones that are like a little overpowered like Ho-Oh, I think it's time for Goodra to get some buffs, and I think we're just missing it over and over and over again. I do not think Goodra is terrible, but I do think it's been overlooked for quite some time. And then our final loser of this patch is going to be a weird one. This is just a personal pet peeve of mine, but when we are taking a look at builds that are not crushing it, like a specific build in a kit that just doesn't work, I do think it's well past time that they do something with Aegislash and Ironhead. A loser in this patch for sure. Until they do something with Ironhead, I do think they are missing out because they essentially have an entire move set for this Pokemon that doesn't really work. Like it works in the lowest tier lobbies, but everything in Unite has like 50 different hit instances to it. So a move that only takes one single instance of damage, yeah, it's cool when you use it against Blastoise's Unite move, but other than that, it just feels like it's completely overpowered in this current meta. It's completely outshined in this current meta. It's not overpowered at all. So I really do think they could tool up Aegislash a bit, for sure. And then finally, our patch loser, Charcadet. Charcadet being Armarouge and Ceruledge. Both builds receiving some really well-deserved nerfs, kind of across the board. Two really overpowered Pokemon. Ceruledge getting nerfs back-to-back. And then Armarouge kind of getting a rework buff. They made another build too powerful. Now getting another nerf. I don't think either of these Pokemon are awful. I've played with both of them, and I think they're both pretty solid. But I do think Charcadet in general is like the big loser of this patch. They recognize this thing is too good, and they're rolling it back. Fair nerfs, in my opinion. And now for our big winner. I mean, I don't know if you expected it. I've been asking for it forever, but I think it's Lapras. There are a few great ones in this patch. Lapras, though, has needed this for so long. This Pokemon has just been... in a world where all the defenders outside of Goodra and Greedent, who Greedent just got buffs too, outside of Goodra and Greedent, were absolutely demolishing every single match. I'm very happy to see Lapras finally come back after being just left out in the cold. You know, it's a freezing rush. And the fact that you have a Pokemon that is like Lapras and is not buffed during freezing rush is absolutely insane. They did buff it, well deserved, good buffs across the board. So my big winner for this patch is Lapras. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. Let me know what you think about this patch in the comments. First, I have two questions for you if you'd like to leave a comment. One, winner and loser, in your opinion, who do you think it is? And two, do you like this patch cadence? I personally do. I think it's really cool that we have a patch and then maybe a few weeks later we have kind of part 2 of that patch. But I would love to hear from you in the community. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I will go back to pulling over Timmy executives. Yeehaw. We did it.